if you are watching this video, chances are you are one of the players over here. I'm making this video so everyone can understand what the ecosystem is about. A lot of people complain the diagram is too complicated or too gibberish to understand. So the whole goal over here is to set up an ecosystem from UK to Africa and have a legal channelized way of channeling money from the online community in UK and EU into Africa. The two key components over here is a UK based EMI over here, that is one. And the second base is a Turkish based bank that I'm going to bring on board, that is the second. These two entities add the majority of the weight and legitimacy to the entire equation. So you have various small UK SPIs. SPI stands for Small Payment Institutions. These are small money transfer operators that predominantly perhaps used to work in the cash domain, but for the purposes of our discussion, they will be working in online payments only. So a customer, they will sign up. The customer will sign up at one of these places. They will have an app, an online app from which they will get the money. And the UK EMI provides the IBAN account. So these are IBAN accounts that can only receive money from these MTOs. These MTOs will point towards this IBAN account that the UK EMI will provide, and the transaction that the customer does, the electronic money goes in there directly. Because the transaction is electronic in nature, the KYC of the customer is already known. So we would know if the customer is making a BACS or a faster payment and from which bank, etc., and so forth. And there is a UK EMD. We'll just come to that. They are the people who are supplying the technology, as well as some other facets of this equation to these MTOs in UK. Most of the UK MTOs have been de-risked. They don't have bank accounts, etc. But for the purposes of our discussion, we will only have a very specific banking route, meaning we will offer them IBANs subject to a very specific set of conditions. The UK EMI would then basically be working with the UK EMD. EMD stands for Electronic Money Distributor, basically an authorized delegate or an agent of the UK EMI. And when the money collected over here would come to the UK EMI in their IBANs, which basically comes to the IBAN of the UK EMD, and from there it has the possibility of going into a couple of places. It can go to a correspondent account in the UK, or it can go to a correspondent account in the EU. Correspondent account to whom? Correspondent account to the Turkish bank. So the responsibility of the UK EMI would be to collect money on this part, move it here, and from here the EMD would push it out to one of the two correspondent accounts, either in the UK or in EU. The correspondent bank accounts belong to the Turkish banks. The reason we bring a bank over here and not a money transfer operator is because they offer a lot of stability, they bring a lot of legitimacy into the equation and so forth. The Turkish banks in consideration would also be having operating all these correspondent accounts in the EU. So whatever money comes over here automatically comes into the Turkish bank. Over here, they would have these small accounts within themselves. The Turkish bank would have accounts within themselves for various money transfer operators in Africa. So let's say a Nigerian money transfer operator could have its settlement account in Turkey. A Tanzanian, money transfer operator could have its account in Turkey. Let's say one based in Ghana could have its settlement account in Turkey. And these could be multi-currency accounts. They could be Turkish lira, they could be US dollar, they could be euros, and so forth. Obviously, for our purposes of a discussion, let's assume everything is in euros. So all these accounts are in euros. This money, even though it's UK, the collection here is GBP. From here it can be into a euro account and the conversion could be done. The money is parked over here into MTOs. So let's say this person is wanting to send money to someone in Lagos, Nigeria. So they go to an MTO that they know has an app. They sign up, register in the app. They pay the money through their bank account. The money comes over here into the UK EMI's IBAN. From there, it goes into the collection disbursement IBAN of the UK EMD. This is basically an internal transfer. From there, once the money is ready to be shipped out, they ship it out to, let's say, the EU correspondent. Once the money is received over here, it channels all the way back into Turkey. And the Turkish bank knows now that they have money over here. So they can do two things. They can either bring the money via Swift into Turkey, or they can leave it there in the books over there and say, okay, we'll give you a net credit over here. Once the credit has been granted, let's say this is the particular Nigerian money transfer operator. whatever euros they had collected or GBP they had collected, the equivalent in euros is credited over here. They can do a couple of things. They can move it to another MTO. So inter movement between different money transfer operators is allowed, and this is a huge plus, because the cost of settlement in Africa is so expensive. Over here, if all the money transfer operators in Africa have a bank account with this Turkish bank, then they can settle instantly amongst themselves without having to do so on the international SWIFT rails in Africa. The Turkish bank also, by the way, happens to work with banks in Africa and provide their correspondent banking over here as well within the Turkish bank. So the money coming here could go through a MTO, or in certain cases it could go through a bank in Africa. So you see this, it could go through a bank in Africa or go through an MTO. So let's say if it goes to an MTO, then obviously the MTO concern over here gets the equivalent credit. Once they have the equivalent credit, they can pay out to the customer. If it comes to a bank, then obviously the bank pays to the customer. But basically, the example is pretty simple. There's the customer. There are small operators that we wish to bring on board. This is where the opportunity is. This is where the first wheel, the front wheels of the vehicle are, which is the UK EMI and the UK EMD. We bring the UK EMD so that we can legally provide them with software solutions, so that we can legally touch the money, because we also want to have a correspondent agreement with the bank in Turkey. The bank in Turkey provides the network in Europe and delivery network in Africa. So the UK EMI can be assured that you're not dealing in any Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, Mary, Joe, Jane Fonda kind of an operation over here. You're dealing with a proper, bona fide, legitimate bank that is going to take custody of funds for further delivery into Africa. The various licensed money transfer operators in Africa have a correspondent settlement account in the Turkish bank. The various banks in Africa can also have an account in the Turkish banks. The Turkish banks can do two things. They can push money into the accounts of the individual MTOs and give them credit in Turkey, and they can ask the local partners to push the money out. So this Nigerian naira could be pushed out by the local MTO, but their euro balance will be maintained over here. The euro balance can come in through a bank in Africa, or they can maintain it here, or if they even want, they can maintain it here and then send it out elsewhere. So this is the second leg of the transaction, where the bank in Turkey provides the rear wheels to this entire equation. So customer, UK SPI MTOs, small payment institution money transfer operators, UK electronic money institution. This is the first key. They would have a UK EMD, an electronic money distributor. This would be the same technology company that would be providing software solutions all over Africa. The money can then go into correspondent bank accounts in UK and EU. These correspondent bank accounts belong to the bank in Turkey. The Turkish bank offers correspondent banking to all the licensed MTOs in multi-currency accounts in Turkey, as well as multi-currency settlement accounts, correspondent accounts to banks in Africa in Turkey as well. The settlement can be through a bank, or through an MTO directly, or through a SWIFT wire transfer to the end client, which is the customer in Africa. And that is what the whole ecosystem is all about.